This sitting is resumed. Honorary member for St. Michael South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I promise I'm going to be extremely brief this evening. I just could not let this moment pass to publicly extend my gratitude to someone who has shaped my life, and in fact, I would say is the reason I'm actually even in this place. I do so, sir, on behalf of the good constituents of St. Michael South, and on a personal level, on behalf of my whole family who admired and totally loved Owen Arthur. You know, I met Owen Arthur as Prime Minister in 1996. I was then a relatively young man, and if you allow me, sir, to call one name, Mackie Holder had invited me to join a group called Wednesday 2000. And I joined Wednesday 2000, and quickly thereafter, there was a Christmas occasion, and we had a gift exchange, and the person whose name I pulled for the gift exchange was none other than Owen Arthur. And I was, you know, I'm a boy, I'm nervous, I'm shaking now, because to meet Owen Arthur for the first time really in person and to then be presenting a gift to him was nerve-wracking for me. And in my mind, I figured a number of ways this conversation was going to go. That our first exchange was going to be something profound and meaningful. And as I was approaching to deliver my gift, Owen said to Mackie, who is this young man? And I remember feeling a little bit like a jolt in my chest, a little bit like, okay. Then he said, young man, are you nervous? And, you know, I pretended not to. And he said, don't be nervous, son. Don't be nervous, son. You know, I'm just a man, he said. Don't be nervous, son. And over time, many times, I would get messages from Prime Minister Arthur. Several times it would surprise me. I would get conversations, it would surprise me. When I left to study in 2000 in London, I went to the office of the Prime Minister and I asked then, Julie, if I can call her that, I said, could I have, I had a picture of Owen Arthur and I wanted it signed. And I had it autographed and I took it with me in London. In London, there were 3 pictures of him on my wall. As a student, the year and some that I was there. It was a picture of Barbados, a picture of Tupac, because I was young, you know, and a picture above my head of Owen Arthur. And I would get up every morning, I'd look at Barbados, and the Tupac thing was, in the event of my demise, when my heart can beat no more, I hope that I die for a principle or a belief that I have lived for. That was on the poster. And I felt at the time Owen represented that too, this idea that he was living for a principle that he lived for. And in my own way, I felt, you know, that I too should live my life in such a way. But I had no regard, to be truthful with you, as a boy for politics. I had zero regard as a boy for politicians. I felt the whole thing was a scheme and a scam, and that those men who offer themselves to political leadership often did not have the interests of poor people at heart. But something changed when I was introduced intellectually to the ideas of Owen Arthur. And I felt perhaps that this thing could be for real, and that maybe there are some men who genuinely want to see the interests of people be advanced in this country. And when Prime Minister Arthur would say he came to stop poor people from being poor, it meant something to me, because growing up in the Pine, I was that poor person he came to stop from being poor. And I joined the branch and I worked a lot under Hamilton Lashley. At the time I became PRO, then vice president, then president of my branch. And I remember when Minister Hamilton Lashley became a minister, Hamilton Lashley would say to me all the time, the only prime minister that would have made me a minister in this country is Owen Arthur. He said that to me repeatedly, that the only prime minister that would have made him a minister was Owen Arthur. Because other ministers, other prime ministers perhaps in his mind might have found all kinds of reasons why he was not good enough. But that Prime Minister Arthur kept faith with him and made him a minister at the time. I recall, sir, around 2006 when the Prime Minister visited Mauritius for a UN SIDS conference. When he came back, he kept saying, small island states have to look out for themselves. They're on their own. He said it to me. He said it in public. He kept saying it over and over. You know, small island developing states are on their own. and that we needed to start. He tried to engage the private sector, to stimulate the third sector. All the things that we are now doing, he foresaw and sought to put things in place to address them. In 2014, I was in the mall with my daughter, who does not take pictures with anybody for any reason. In fact, she doesn't even like to take pictures with me, for fear that I might post her on Facebook or Instagram. We were in the mall, and I saw Prime Minister Arthur there, and we spoke briefly, and he gave me words of advice, but she asked to take a picture with him. She doesn't take pictures with people. And I think she wanted to take the picture with him because of how I felt about Prime Minister Arthur, how I represented him, and in her own little mind, the idea that she could take a picture with somebody who was so genuine, not great necessarily, but genuine and real, and who made such an impact on my own life. And I think it meant a lot to her. It surely meant a lot to me. But you know, I really think it also meant a lot to Prime Minister Arthur, because there was a smile on his face when she wanted to take a picture with him. And I think that as we get older sometimes, and as we go into political life, sometimes we are forgotten. And that maybe there is a way in which we like to think our legacy extends itself to future generations. If I had time, I would tell you the story of when I met Skeeter Davis. AJ is saying I have time, so I'll tell it. And that she was here for a concert, and I went at the end of the concert, and I got a tape. Back then you had tapes, you know? And I wanted the tape autographed. And Skeeter Davis was so excited. She said, "Tell me more about yourself." And I did. And then she said, "But what brought you into my music?" I said, "No, it's not for me, it's for my mother." And I saw her facial expression change. I saw her facial expression change, the sadness, and I regret. Even though as we tell this story, when I think about it, I regret the fact that I did not read that moment. You know, that I completely misread the moment. Because she also felt, I guess, that she wanted to think that her music would extend itself to other generations. I mean, I was a young man. I was a young man then, sir. But, you know, I would also then start getting messages when I was present at the branch, when I was hemming and hawing, should I run, should I not run? Many times, Owen Arthur calling. I would see my phone, Owen Arthur calling, giving me advice. As a young minister, from time to time on WhatsApp, young Humphrey, because then, I must tell you, it felt good when he realized my name. Remember, in our first conversation, Tamaki Holder, he said, "Who is this young man?" And then I became young Humphrey time and time again. Young Humphrey, you're doing well. Young Humphrey, you should enter public service. Even though I'm not so young anymore. But it felt good to have that kind of reward and recognition from Owen Arthur. And, you know, as I close, because I promised I was going to be brief, there was an incident, though, that kind of hurt my feelings as it related to Owen. We were at a school function. At a school function, I wouldn't say the school, but he'd come to see his daughter, I imagine, and my daughter was there at the time. And the Labour Party had just lost the government around 2008, 2009 or so. We were entering the hall of the school. And former Prime Minister Arthur, we got there late, I got there late, I think he got there late too. The hall is packed. And you had to go and find a chair for yourself. Each man breaking into other classrooms, trying to find a chair for themselves. A former Prime Minister a few months ago, probably, I can't remember the exact time, but he too had to go and try to find a chair for himself. But in both, I offered him the chair he had. He said, "No, don't worry, young Humphrey." But in both for a chair. And I just feel there is a dignity, sir, that should be shown to former prime ministers who have served this country, sir, that they should always be recognized in this country, sir, as prime minister. They should never find themselves in such a position. In fact, it is anathema to me, and I think to any right-thinking Barbadian that such is the case. I think that former prime minister should have access to a driver, an official car, should be given an official invitation to these things, should always be given seating. That it was shameful, and I'm not saying so politically because as far as I know, there are no living former prime ministers in the Barbados Labour Party. So it's not a political point. I feel the same should extend to any prime minister. Because serving a country, sir, at that level is hard work. And it has a price, sir, on your health, sir, on your relationship with your family, your friends. If you're not careful, your relationship with your Lord. difficult work. And I just feel, sir, that we have in this country to treat former prime ministers a lot better than we do. And I can still think of, in my mind's eye, I can still see Owen Arthur having to look for a chair. And I never felt it was right, sir. And I hope that we, as a group, sir, as a government, I hope that we rectify it, because it is one of those things, sir, that do not stand well with me. So, sir, I just want to close by thanking the family. I want to thank, of course, for being here and for listening to us and for giving us Owen Arthur and for allowing him to serve this country the way that he served this country, for molding us, sir. Some of us, when Owen first affected me, I hadn't even met him. You do not even know the extent to which people in this country were affected by Prime Minister Arthur, the way Minister Strong spoke about it earlier. So I want to offer my most sincere condolences to the family. But beyond that, I want to offer a real deep, genuine sense of gratitude for what Prime Minister Arthur has done for myself personally and for my family and for this country. With those words, sir, I'm obliged. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, the hour is late, and I promise you and members of this chamber, members of the family, that I'm going to be brief. I have enjoyed tremendously listening to all of the various anecdotes that were related by members. I feel a little bit impoverished because I don't think that any of the personal anecdotes that I can offer will generate anywhere near as much interest as those that we've heard. But anecdotes apart, I stand tonight in this chamber to express the debt of gratitude that I feel towards Owen Arthur. My regret is, Mr. Speaker, that I never expressed it to him personally. There are two people in public life to whom I feel I owe this debt. One is, of course, the member for St. Andrew, who has known me since I was about 16, and who has guided me along much of this journey. But there was a point in time, sir, when the member for St. Andrew and Owen Arthur had diverged somewhat. And I was more than surprised when, after we won the 99 election, he called me and offered me an opportunity to sit in the Senate. Because of the extent to which he and the member of St. Andrew had diverged, I never even thought that it was a possibility that he would embrace me in that way. I well recollect what he told me. We were in government house, and the swearing had taken place, and he said to me, "Young Marshall," and I guess he called everybody young. For a man who was not at that time old himself, this would have been in 99, he was calling everybody young. He said, "Young Marshall, I'm giving you an opportunity, use it well." I don't know that I particularly distinguished myself in the Senate, but one fateful day, there's a lawyer who used to call me frequently. He was on the other side, and he would always call me, and my secretary would be told when she asked, "Who is it calling?" He would say, "Tell Mr. Marshall it's Owen Arthur." Well, after the first 8 times of this particular prank, one day in question, I got a call, and my secretary said, "It's Owen Arthur." My response when I picked up the phone, sir, was not polite. Unfortunately, it turned out to be Owen Arthur. And, you know, he acknowledged that it was really Owen Arthur, and he asked if I would consider running in St. Joseph. I have seen a man of tremendous brilliance, a man of tremendous wit. I think that we, as politicians, can lose the common touch. But if you've seen Owen Arthur playing dominoes, eating sauce, drinking rum, or whatever else he used to drink, You would know, sir, that he was an individual who recognized that it was the people to whom he was obligated, and it was the people who gave him the strength and the authority that he had. I suppose it would be historically accurate for me to say that I was one of his 3 deputies. He had 2 deputy prime ministers and 1 deputy leader of the opposition. Somebody told me that there's no such thing in the laws of Barbados, and therefore I should be careful laying any claim to it. But during that time, I enjoyed a relationship with Owen Arthur, which I don't imagine that it was in any way precious. I don't delude myself into thinking that I was of any tremendous value. But what was important about it to me was that I got to see how a brilliant political mind works. And he led our party into a 2013 election that I consider to have been a remarkable success for us, even though we did not win at the polls. I've seen the brilliance of Mr. Arthur in law. In fact, it was a terrible thing being an Attorney General for Mr. Arthur, because whenever he asked you a legal question, you were almost certain that he already knew the answer, especially when it came to matters relating to the single market and economy. In fact, I worried then that he only asked me to confirm what he already knew to be correct. I could go on, but I won't. I am eternally grateful to him for having invited me to be one of his senators, to having invited me to run, to having invited me to be a part of his cabinet, and then finally Attorney General. On all of those occasions that we worked, I believe that I saw a mind at work and not just a man at work. I will always regret that I didn't take the opportunity, especially in recent times, to express my gratitude, but I express it now to his family, to his widow, to his children, and to all his grieving relatives. And I feel that the party has suffered a tremendous loss. The country has suffered a tremendous loss. But I know that the loss that you feel is the hardest one of all. And I extend to you, on behalf of myself, my family, and my constituency of St. Joseph, our heartfelt condolences.
Honorable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The many things that have been said about Owen Arthur here today, especially his achievements as Prime Minister, I believe bear testimony to the rich and enduring legacy which he has left behind, a legacy which I think will serve us still in good stead as we navigate the murky waters that confront us as a nation. I want to speak to the 3 things I would say that connect me or connected me with Owen Arthur, and consequently my tribute will not be long. All 3 things were outside of the realm of politics for me because they all occurred while I was a serving officer of the Barbados Defense Force. The first one had to do with the fact that I was responsible for providing some draft speeches on security for Owen Arthur as Prime Minister. And in order for me to do that, I studied Owen Arthur in terms of the speeches he would have made, every single one on security here and abroad. And one day, he looked at me and he said to me, "You are writing these just like I would." And I said, "Yes, Prime Minister, because I read every single speech that you gave on security," to which he chuckled. So that was the first thing. But the second, and I would say the most important of the 3, had to do with the 2 occasions that Barbados's sovereignty came under threat. Both occasions had to do with agreements by the United States with other countries in the Caribbean, and in one case globally. The first one was spoken to today, or spoken about, mentioned, that is the Ship Rider Agreement. That was a bilateral agreement that the United States signed at the time with Caribbean countries, an agreement which gave the United States the authority to pursue vessels suspected of drug trafficking within the territorial waters of Caribbean countries. That is the United States Coast Guard and Navy. And Owen Arthur refused to sign that agreement for some obvious reasons at the time. And we ended up, Barbados that is, signing a ship rider agreement that was completely different from the agreement that was signed with all of the other countries. And for me, that was a very strong statement. But the second one had to do with the United Nations article. I don't remember the number, but I think it was 92, in which the United States was seeking to have exempted from prosecution their military servicemen and women who were deployed on overseas missions and who might have committed some offense, exempted from prosecution by foreign countries. Owen Arthur did not agree to that either and did not sign that. And that resulted in Barbados being denied military assistance that we were getting at the time. And what for me was really very encouraging about the response from Owen Arthur at the time, and I happened to be in a place where he was speaking to some officials from the United States of America. And he said at the time that he didn't have any problems at all with United States denying military or security assistance to Barbados, because in his view, the security of Barbados was not the responsibility of the United States, but the responsibility of the government and the people of Barbados. And in my eyes, as a young officer, he grew about 3 feet, because I really